Just days ago, something extraordinary happened inside the Republican Party, and most people still don't fully understand what it actually means. Marjorie Taylor Greene, once considered one of Donald Trump's most loyal soldiers, publicly turned her back on him. But this isn't just another political disagreement. This is about something far more significant. The moment when loyalty itself becomes the weapon used against you, when a president realizes he cannot control everyone, and when the very movement he built reveals itself to be fundamentally fragile. Today, we're going to break down what this rupture actually means, why Trump's decision to exile one of his most committed allies signals a deeper panic, and what this tells us about the real architecture of power in the Republican Party and American politics right now. Before we go any further, please subscribe to this channel. Just weeks ago, Marjorie Taylor Greene was indistinguishable from Donald Trump in the eyes of most Americans. She was the firebrand, the loyalist, the member of Congress willing to say the things others wouldn't. She had aligned herself with Trump so thoroughly that her identity had become fused with his. She was a MAGA true believer. She had earned her reputation as someone who would take bullets for the president. Her voting record, her rhetoric, her public posture, everything was calibrated to signal total allegiance to Trump and his vision for America. Then something unexpected happened. Greene began to notice something that many in Trump's orbit have discovered. Loyalty is a one-way street, and Trump's definition of loyalty is absolute obedience. And when he realized he couldn't have that, when he realized Greene had a mind of her own and wasn't simply a puppet designed to nod and comply, he turned on her with the kind of vitriol usually reserved for his political enemies. The flashpoint was the Epstein files. During his campaign, Trump had promised his supporters that if elected, he would release the Justice Department's files related to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. It was a campaign promise that energized the MAGA base, particularly those who believed that powerful elites had been protected for years, that there was a deep state conspiracy, that the files would expose a network of corruption reaching into the highest levels of government and business. Trump promised this would all be revealed once he took office. But here's what happened instead. After Trump returned to power in 2025, the Justice Department under Attorney General Pam Bondi began a mysterious review of the Epstein files. Months passed. Conservative influencers and MAGA supporters grew increasingly frustrated. The promised revelations never came. In fact, the administration began actively discouraging the release of these files. When members of Congress, including Greene, began pushing for a formal House vote to release the Epstein documents, the White House sent a warning. Support for this was viewed as a hostile act. A hostile act, that's what the Trump administration called congressional oversight, the basic constitutional duty of Congress to demand transparency about an investigation that involved the sex trafficking of minors. Marjorie Taylor Greene had a choice in that moment. She could have fallen in line like so many others. She could have accepted the administration's pressure, quietly withdrawn her support from the Epstein discharge petition, and maintained her status as a Trump insider. She was uniquely positioned to do so. She had been loyal. She had proven herself. She had the kind of relationship with Trump that most Republican elected officials would trade almost anything for, but she didn't back down. Instead, Greene did something that violated the unspoken rule of Trumpism. She told the truth. She said that she believed the files should be released. She said that her constituents expected Congress to do its job. She said that the White House official who called it a hostile act was a coward for speaking anonymously. And most importantly, she said something that Trump fundamentally cannot accept. You didn't elect me. I am not employed by you. My duty is to my district. In that moment, Greene articulated the constitutional reality that the Trump presidency has spent years trying to destroy. The idea that elected officials answer to their constituents first, not to the president. This is not radical. This is not extreme. This is American constitutional democracy in its most basic form. But to Trump, it was an act of betrayal, and so the withdrawal of Trump's endorsement came quickly. Within days, Trump was calling Greene a lightweight, accusing her of betraying the Republican Party, saying she had lost her way. He revoked his endorsement and signaled that he would support a primary challenger. He called her a ranting lunatic. He said he couldn't take her calls anymore because she was constantly complaining. What had Greene been complaining about? That the Trump administration was spending too much time on foreign policy and not enough on the domestic issues affecting American families. That grocery prices were higher than Trump claimed. That the promises about bringing manufacturing back to America hadn't materialized. That tariffs were driving up the cost of housing and goods. That the administration's focus seemed disconnected from the material reality of working Americans. These are not conspiracy theories. These are not radical socialist critiques. These are empirical observations about policy and economics. The National Association of Home Builders has estimated that tariffs will add nearly $11,000 to the cost of a typical new home. Construction costs are rising 4 to 6% specifically because of tariff-driven material costs. And yet, when Greene pointed this out, when she asked the president to focus on the real economic problems facing Americans instead of constant foreign policy tours, she was labeled as having lost her way. What this moment reveals is the true mechanism of Trump's control over the Republican Party. It's not based on shared values or a coherent philosophy. It's not even based on policy agreement. It's based on one thing and one thing only: total, absolute, unconditional loyalty. The moment you question the president on anything, the moment you put your constituents' needs above his political interests, the moment you dare to speak a truth that contradicts what Trump wants to believe, you become an enemy. This is the control mechanism that has held the Republican Party together since 2016. Not ideology, not governance, not shared vision, loyalty, pure weaponized loyalty. And the price of disloyalty is immediate and public exile. It's the withdrawal of support. It's threats of primary challenges. It's the mobilization of the MAGA base against you. It's being cast out from what had become your political home. But here's what's more significant than the rupture between Trump and Green. Here's what should concern anyone paying attention. Green's decision to speak up reveals that the emperor has no clothes. Trump's control over the Republican Party is not based on strength. It's based on manufactured consent and the willingness of others to obey. The moment someone with Green's profile, someone with a committed base, someone with media presence, someone with nothing left to lose within Trump's favor, decides to tell the truth, the whole structure becomes visible for what it is, and that terrifies Trump. That's why he moved so quickly to exile her. That's why he's signaling he'll support primary challengers. That's why he's trying to delegitimize her before more people start paying attention to what she's actually saying. Because if other Republican elected officials begin to realize that they can survive political independence, that their constituents might actually reward them for telling the truth about tariffs and housing costs and grocery prices, then the entire system of control collapses. But Trump's decision to exile Green reveals something else about his style of leadership, something that extends far beyond this one conflict. It reveals his fundamental reliance on what historians and political analysts have called controlled chaos. Steve Bannon, Trump's former chief strategist, once described the strategy this way: flooding the zone with shit. It means overwhelming your opponents, the media, and the public with so many actions, controversies, and scandals that no one can focus on any single issue long enough to mount an effective response. Trump uses this strategy constantly. He makes outrageous statements that draw media attention. He issues executive orders with severe consequences that trigger legal challenges. He creates internal conflicts within his own administration that leak to the press. He does all of this deliberately because it achieves two things. It keeps everyone reacting to him instead of acting on their own terms, and it creates such informational chaos that people give up trying to understand what's really happening. They just accept that everything is crazy and move on with their lives. The exile of Marjorie Taylor Greene fits perfectly into this pattern. It creates a high-profile conflict. It dominates news cycles. It energizes Trump's base on one side and energizes Greene's supporters on the other. But while everyone is focused on this drama, something else is happening. While the media covers the Trump-Greene feud, other things that matter enormously to your life are happening in silence. Consider the media silence itself. A Gallup poll conducted in September 2025 found that American confidence in mass media has collapsed to 31%, the lowest level ever recorded since the metric began being tracked in the 1970s. Among Republicans, trust has fallen to just 12%, but this isn't leading to more aggressive reporting from major news institutions. Instead, it's leading to paralysis. When your audience doesn't trust you, you lose the ability to set the agenda. You lose the power to hold power accountable. And look at what's happening with the Epstein files. Multiple House Democrats released emails from the Epstein estate in November 2025 that showed Epstein claimed Trump spent hours at my house with one of the sex-trafficked victims. Instead of major media outlets running with this story, instead of detailed investigation into what these communications actually mean, the story was immediately framed as Democrats engaging in selective leaks to create a fake narrative. The media apparatus that should have been investigating instead became defensive, more concerned with accusations of bias than with actual reporting. This is Trump's real genius, not policy, not governance, but the systematic manipulation of information systems and the weaponization of institutional distrust. He creates conditions where institutions lose credibility. He makes it so that when actual damaging information emerges, people don't believe it because they've been trained not to believe anything. It's not that he controls the media, it's that he's destroyed the public's faith in the media as a concept. And while everyone was distracted by the Epstein files and the MTG exile, something far more consequential was happening in the background. Manufacturing is not returning to America in the way Trump promised. Tariffs are not bringing back jobs. They're raising prices. A home builder in Michigan is now charging customers $11,000 more for a new house because of Trump's tariffs. A single parent in Ohio is paying more for groceries, more for rent, more for materials to build anything. The housing crisis is worsening. Retirement security is collapsing. A study released in 2025 by Natixis IM found that 43% of individual investors now believe it will take a miracle to achieve retirement security. The Social Security Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund is projected to be depleted by 2033. That's within the next decade. Without congressional action, that will trigger automatic 21% cuts to all benefits. And yet these issues are not being discussed. They're not the focus of national attention. Instead, everyone is arguing about the Epstein files. This is not accidental. This is the system working exactly as designed. But here's where the real political realignment becomes visible. The fracture between Trump and Green is not about personalities. It's a visible crack in what was supposed to be a monolithic movement. It reveals that the MAGA coalition is not as unified as it appears. Just weeks before Green's break with Trump, Elon Musk, who was supposedly a co-president who was supposed to represent the Trumpist vision of oligarchic competence, publicly broke with Trump over the budget bill Musk called Trump's Big Beautiful Bill a disgusting abomination and announced he was starting a new political party. According to polling at the time, Musk's hypothetical America Party would attract 40% of U.S. voters and 57% of Republican voters. These are not small fractures. These are fundamental challenges to Trump's control of the Republican Party. And yet what's remarkable is how these cracks have been managed. Green, despite Trump's exile, has not been destroyed. She's actually gaining support in certain quarters observers across the political spectrum, from David Axelrod, a former Obama advisor, to other media figures, have found themselves agreeing with Green's criticisms. She's been appearing on mainstream media shows, speaking about cost of living, offering critiques of both Trump and the Republican establishment. She's been elevated by this conflict rather than diminished by it. The same thing is happening with institutional collapse more broadly. Trust in Congress is collapsing. Trust in the Supreme Court is collapsing. Trust in the FBI, the military, the CDC, trust in almost every major institution is at historic lows. In 2025, only 31% of Americans have confidence in mass media. The previous low point was 40%. We've entered truly uncharted territory. And here's what's crucial to understand. Trump didn't create this institutional collapse, but he's accelerating it. He's weaponizing it. He's using the fact that people no longer trust institutions to expand executive power and reduce institutional checks on that power. He's firing inspectors general. He's gutting oversight agencies. He's dismantling Voice of America and foreign media broadcasts. He's doing all of this because he knows that institutions can no longer effectively resist him, that the American people have lost faith in those institutions so thoroughly that the president can dismantle them with relatively little pushback. This is the deeper pattern that connects the Epstein files, the MTG exile, the media silence, and the economic crisis affecting ordinary Americans. Trump has identified that American institutions are failing, that people's trust in democracy, media, and oversight systems is at historic lows, and he's using that crisis of confidence to consolidate power. He's not trying to reform institutions, he's trying to make them irrelevant. And the price of this strategy is being paid by ordinary Americans. Because while Trump is consolidating power, housing is becoming unaffordable, retirement security is evaporating, manufacturing jobs are not returning, wages are not rising, prices are rising. The tariffs that were supposed to bring jobs back are actually raising the cost of living. The same people who voted for Trump because they believed his promises about economic renewal are watching those promises fail to materialize, but they can't get reliable information about why because media institutions have lost all credibility. They're trapped in a kind of informational hell. They can't trust institutions to tell them the truth. They can't get reliable economic data. They're told to trust only Trump. But Trump's policies are directly harming their economic security. And rather than acknowledge this contradiction, the system responds by exiling people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who try to point it out. The real question now is whether this system is sustainable. Can Trump actually maintain political control while delivering economic pain? History suggests the answer is no. Economic dissatisfaction typically becomes the primary driver of political change. Sooner or later, enough people realize that their lives are actually getting worse, not better. And when that realization sets in, when it becomes undeniable despite all the informational chaos, political movements begin to fracture. We're already seeing those early signs, the fracture between Trump and Green, the defection of Elon Musk, the emergence of Trump's enemies list, people he's threatening with primary challenges or political exile. The cracks are forming. What happens next depends on whether political figures will be willing to follow Green's example, to tell the truth about what's happening, even if it means risking Trump's favor and enduring his wrath. Because here's what this moment reveals about the future of the Republican Party and American politics more broadly. The institutions that were supposed to check presidential power are failing. The media can't provide reliable information. Congress has ceded its authority. The courts are overwhelmed and moving slowly. The American people have lost faith in all of these systems. Into that void, power concentrates. And the only question remaining is whether it concentrates around Trump indefinitely, or whether enough people wake up to the reality that his promises are failing, his policies are harmful, and his demand for absolute loyalty is fundamentally incompatible with serving the American people. That's what Marjorie Taylor Greene exposed, not some new scandal or revelation, but the fundamental fragility of Trump's control system. The moment when one person decided that telling the truth mattered more than staying in the good graces of the president, the moment when the machinery of loyalty revealed itself to be dependent on willing participants, and one of those participants decided to stop willing. Everything that happens next flows from that moment. The coming decade of American politics will be shaped not by Trump's plans or his policies, but by whether enough people follow Greene's example, whether enough people decide that their constituents matter more than presidential favor, whether enough people tell the truth even when they're threatened with exile. Thank you. Let's build a New York and an America where truth and accountability come first. Good night.